Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. 3 writers in Russia. 3 English writers in Russia. 3 English writers from the same period in Russia. What happens? Why do they choose Russia? What does it say about Russia? What does it say about them? And more to the point, are those novels any good? Now, today, 3 fantastic English writers from the second half of the 20th century. Michael Frayn with The Russian Interpreter from 1967, Penelope Fitzgerald with The Beginning of Spring from 1988, and Beryl Banbridge with Winter Garden from 1980. Now, all 3 are set in Moscow. Banbridge and Frayn are set. Frayn is set, let's say, at the end of 1950s, and Banbridge is at the end of the 1960s, 70s. Penelope Fitzgerald set her novel in 1913, before the revolution. Now, what is interesting about comparing those novels, which are really stylistically very different in tone, in writing, in doses of irony and humor, they really are very, very different. Those 3 writers, in fact, couldn't be more different in many, many ways. Well, what is interesting to them is that they also are unified very much by a certain idea of Russia, at the time of description, of course, which is strongly related to who their characters are and how they act, react, and behave in a general way. So, Penelope Fitzgerald is this immense English writer. I already talked about her on this channel. And The Beginning of Spring is set in 1913 in Moscow, where basically it's a man who's been left by his wife, and it's very unclear what's happened, really, and he doesn't know. In fact, he doesn't know anything, really. She left him, went back to Europe. She left the kids behind as well, and so this man, Frank, finds himself with those 2 kids. He has a small company, and he can see, he can feel, he can hear that things are changing in Russia. He feels very good in Russia, he loves it there, he feels at home in many ways, but he also understands that there are many things happening that he's not directly conscious of. And he understands that behind the scene of reality that he engages with every day as a businessman, as a father, as a man, there are many, many things happening that he doesn't understand or is only very dimly aware of. And that is really the same for Michael Frayn. The Michael Frayn is much more based on Michael Frayn himself, probably. Michael Frayn is a translator of Russian. He studied Russian after the war. And we can see that it's a young Russian-speaking Englishman who lives in Moscow, and who's certainly being approached by, well, English diplomats and politicians, and he doesn't really understand what is going on, but he understands that something is going on. And the Russia that he knows and loves and feels very comfortable with is also certainly much more problematic and mysterious than he thought. As for Beryl Banbridge, Beryl Banbridge has a group of artists going to Moscow for some sort of cultural exchange, as it were. And among them is a man who's a lover, or a hopeful lover, of one of the artists on the expedition. And she's much more deeply ironic, Banbridge, and she's much more critical also, or at least makes critical references to the political climate of the time than do Michael Frayn and Penelope Fitzgerald. Now, what is interesting here is that, first of all, despite being very different in style and in tone, those 3 novels are united by what those 3 novelists anyway possessed in abundance: very light touch, an exceptional craftsmanship, the ability to write extremely well, but not only that, to write very well technically speaking, in a sense that it requires the reader to pay attention. It's very nuanced, very subtle, very funny and ironic, but yes, it is a more demanding read in the sense that if you simply skim the surface, you will miss what makes those novels so fantastically good, of course. So, patience, attention are amply rewarded in those novels. But yes, it is. You have to be ready to invest in that. Those are short novels. They can be read rather quickly. But again, every detail counts, every remark counts, and certainly in the Penelope Fitzgerald, she was not somebody who wrote endless pages to say nothing. Everything counts. Lightness of touch, irony, of course. Now, there are aspects of gender in all three. Let's say that in Fitzgerald, Frank, being left by his wife, is finding himself in a sort of reversal of gender roles at the time, where he has to take care of the kids, his kids, on his own. He's a single father, certainly. And aspect of gender in Penelope Fitzgerald and Banbridge, of course, because they are, first of all, women, certainly in Penelope Fitzgerald, but also because women are, in Banbridge, as in all our works really, women are both very fierce and cruelly self-reflective and ironic about the state of, let's say, women in the 70s in England or in the world in general, as far as she's concerned. And so there is more, again, very subtle, but there is more irony directed at gender in Bear of Banbridge than the other two. So, what unites them beyond this? Well, what unites them is a sense of bewilderment. All three novels are full of protagonists or main characters and even secondary characters who basically find it very difficult to make sense of what's going on around them. Now, it can be cultural, because things are done differently. It can be linguistic, simply because there is a language barrier that means that people don't understand one another. Certainly in the Bay of Banbridge, they're constantly surrounded by people who speak Russian, but they don't speak any of it. And also the bewilderment, or the sense of being lost, because, again, there's always a world next to their world. There is always a reality next to their own reality. In Barrow Banbridge, for example, that reality is distinctly a sort of, the communist state of the 70s, post-Cold War, in other words, a repression of news and of people and of opinion, of course, and of freedom in general, and the state apparatus being everywhere. So intense, constant surveillance, people spying on you at all times, you suspect everyone to be spying on you, and really, you cannot take at face value whichever official tells you, simply because it's never quite clear whether what they say is the truth or is propaganda. In a Fitzgerald and in the Michael Frayn novel, certainly in the Michael Frayn has an air of almost John le Carré or Graham Greene type of spy novel, without the green element of morals and religion, let me say. But there is a strong sense here of a semi-spy novel. Of course, Michael Frayn is one of the great comic writers of the world, really. So there is always that comic element, this sense of wit, but again, subtle, not guffawing type of love, of course, and still the sense that nothing is quite what it seems, that behind the scene, behind the screens, there is something else happening, and that the world of his protagonist is not quite the world of the Russian characters around the protagonist. And so this sense of who is whom, what is what exactly, this displacement of certainties. As for Penelope Fitzgerald, this sense of bewilderment, this sense of not everything is what it seems, is of course accentuated by the date, 1913, 4 years before the October Revolution. A world, or Russia, therefore, beset by, pre-revolutionaries, Tsarist movement, all the little parties springing up and down the country, preparing, of course, for the revolution. In other words, a sense again that even if her reality and her world are quite solid and well defined, everything happening around gives it another meaning, another possible meaning, and nothing, again, is quite what it seems to be. Now, why did they choose Russia? Well, it's very clear, of course, that from what I've said, the political climate and the general sense of what Russia was as a country made it a good place, a good setting for introducing this element of, well, do we understand what we see? Do we know that what we see is what it is? What is basically the reality of this country, and can we even penetrate that reality? Really, in all three books, there is no, certainly in the Fitzgerald and in the Frayne novel, there is no negative sentiment towards Russia, and even in Bainbridge, she's not really worried about that at all, and certainly there is no negative word about the people, and that's not the point. So there is no negative connotations or feelings towards Russia. It is much more this idea that is it possible, even when you live there, when you converse in a language, is it possible that actually you're missing out on what Russia and Russians really are? Can you know another culture, even if you are intimately familiar with many aspects of it? How far do you understand the world that you live in? And in the case of Frank, for example, in the Penelope Fitzgerald book, he's been living there for a few years. Certainly in the case of Michael Frayn, this young Englishman serves as an interpreter, lives in Moscow, and he's been there for a while as well. So he feels comfortable, like all three, in all three novels, they do feel comfortable. And yet, Russia carries those connotations at those times, at that time, of course, carries those connotations of secrecy, of hidden agenda, of things are not what they seem, of spying, of people withholding their opinions, of people being afraid of being overheard and so never speaking out loud, therefore, of the reality being very, very different from the projected reality, the distance between what the state promotes as the reality and what the reality actually is. So this atmosphere of intrigue in all of them is actually created by the political situation, but also by the sort of cultural references that we have. And certainly the Bainbridge book makes fun of that as well, with the great Russian soul type of character here and there, the propagandist, but at the same time very human people, people who may, in fact, do suffer, but the idea of, again, not being able to mention that explicitly means that her characters, Beryl Bainbridge's characters, do not understand any of the things that happen around them. They are driven around the country, but nothing makes sense. What they see doesn't make sense, and certainly doesn't make sense to them, even if they know the historical background. They have no idea how to interpret what they see. Is it the reality? Is it a projected reality? And this sense of distortion of reality is, of course, what enables all three writers to, well, have great fun in many situations. Typically, of course, when there is incomprehension and communication breakdown, that can be exploited by skillful writers, and those three writers certainly are very skillful indeed. So, in conclusion, really, three extremely fine novels, more than extremely fine, three very, very good novels from three absolutely great novelists, masters at their craft, Michael Frayn, Penelope Fitzgerald and Beryl Bainbridge. Three very different novels with a different taste, a different atmosphere in each of them. Levels of irony, level of subtlety, levels of humor, also going across all three, but ultimately three novels using the same setting to have a certain type of questioning about their own characters and about perhaps what it is to know or to not know the other. Absolutely recommended. Please let me know what you thought of them, which one you preferred perhaps. And I can only wish you the very best of reading times. Thank you. Until next time. Bye-bye.